what's going on, everybody? Jonathan Bailor here, back with another episode of the SANE Show, and a show unlike any other for you here today. Because I want to introduce you to someone who's had a big role in my life and a big role in SANE, and hopefully soon will have a big role in your life, and is maybe not necessarily someone you would expect to see on this show, but is undoubtedly an interesting wellness expert in and of his own right, based on what's been going on over the past 6 years. He is the man behind a bunch of stuff you will be seeing now, coming from behind the curtain to in front of the camera. His name is Justin McAleece, and I'll tell you more about him, but Justin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jonathan.
So I wanted to bring Justin on the show because Justin is actually at the core of everything. You know, if you follow SANE or if you follow me, you've seen Justin's work. This goes all the way back to the SANE 101 video that kind of started all of this 6 years ago, to the Better movie that's going to be coming out in January of 2021. And what's been amazing, Justin, can you talk a little bit about maybe what sort of drew you to, I mean, you're a filmmaker by trade, but you've kind of become your own wellness warrior along that journey. What inspired you to take your cinematographic talents, your storytelling talents, and to move that into the wellness world?
Well, I think I saw something that you had put so much thought into and so much energy and really passion into the idea of getting to the bottom of something that confuses a lot of people. And I saw that and I said, I want to be able to help him get that to the next level and tell that to the maximum amount of people in the most efficient way possible. And so I wasn't capable. Certainly I don't have the breadth of knowledge that you have or that your team has been able to put together to accomplish that goal, nor would I want to start. But what I could do is bring my unique talents and the unique talents of Bailor Media to get that out there to the masses who need it and really, fix that misinformation and crazy amount of over information that is just confusing, to hopefully get to the bottom of those things.
And there's so much focus, and I even fell victim to this for a while, on information. And there's no, information. I'm not trying to downplay information. It's extremely important, but there's a tremendous amount of wellness information out there, but that isn't translating into a tremendous amount of action. What do you think is missing in that equation?
Well, it's, I sort of compare it a little bit to how AM radio is a lot of times, or just long form radio is. They have a vested interest in not telling you all the answers up front and not actually getting to the root of the problem and not actually giving you, usable information about what you could do today. It's way better and easier for them to just sort of talk around the subjects or talk around the actions so that they have another show tomorrow and next week and next month. Like, they need to build that into the basis of what they're talking about. So I thought that what I saw you doing and what I knew that we could do within the movie was to create something that didn't leave anything on the cutting room floor that would be useful to the person. We weren't setting up for part 2. And we were not trying to make something that would be able to allow us to make 10 more episodes. That just wasn't the point at all. I wanted to, from minute one on that project on Better, and what it used to be called Diabesity, was like, give them the maximum amount of usable information in the smallest amount of time in the most transformative way possible so that they would believe it. I mean, have the ability to affect their lives in a great way, and to see the science for what it was, that it was factual and that it was well balanced and that it had a large degree of overwhelming evidence. I mean, that's really what we were trying to do. And I just thought it was just like this perfect situation to be able to bring that to the world.
I remember when we were at one of the shoots where we were filming the Better movie, you came out of one of the studios, let's call it, and it was after interviewing one of the cast members, and you were in tears because the emotional stories we were hearing were so impactful. What were the biggest personal lessons that you've taken away from this, let's say top 3 personal lessons that you've taken away from this undertaking over the past 6 years?
It's the thing that you have to remind yourself over and over again, is that you don't really know how other people feel and what they've gone through. If you haven't been in their shoes, then it just doesn't resonate with you in the same sort of way. So being in that situation, in that room with these people for an hour at a time, and like really raw, and they couldn't see my face too on these confession situations. They couldn't even see my face. They were just looking at a camera. So there was even one more level removed of them being able to just go in there and just spill their guts and really get to something that was, so profound to their lives that I had really not a good understanding of at all. So just being able to understand other humans in a deep, grounded way that I haven't in the past, specifically relating to weight loss and shame and all those things that are in that. I would say that was number one for sure. Number two, that giving people answers is not always the easiest way to get them to accomplish the goals that they could set with those answers. I mean, there's a lot of other things around that, based on psychology, that you need to get behind. And it's just not, teaching someone to fish doesn't mean they're going to go fish and provide fish for their family. It's often not that simple. And so I think there's innumerable lessons there along the way, and especially from SANE and from what you've been able to teach me of how hopefully to get them to take the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step, because there's so many steps within their own lives to actually be able to accomplish what they want. Third thing is that, like, it's a rough world out there, and there's a lot of information, and you try to cut through it, and you try to stick to your guns and be as specific and usable as possible. And you can't sort of divest your focus into other things just because they seem to be the hot topic of the day. Stick to what is the core of what matters to your message.
And when it comes to staying focused and this hitting close to home, being emotional, I know your mother, just from personal experience, has had a journey in terms of her health. How can you tell us a little bit about that experience, and maybe what's changed, or how your perception of your mom and even what's changed in her life based on what you've learned as part of this journey?
I think I have a better understanding of what she goes through, and a lot of the cycles that, biologically speaking, people go through, not just as they get older and things like that, but how these things can cascade upon each other, and how little it might have to do with willpower, and how there are so many things physiologically at play that I never understood before, how they all interacted and how complicated it was. And so it's very easy for a naturally thin person, to look at someone and be like, well, it's just willpower, or just laziness, or just whatever it happens to be. And I always had my mom in the back of my mind to be able to, like, sort of squash that in with me, just because obviously it's my mom. And, I'm like, well, my mom is in this situation, so it can't be just this, because I know these things about her. But I couldn't put it into words. I didn't know why that made sense to me, or why I compelled myself to have that make sense to me. So finding out later, while during the process of this, like, all these physiological things really opened my mind to be able to say, oh, I get it now. Like, this is as hard as you say it is. And these are the ways that you understand it, so that you're not just mad at yourself or sad at yourself, or dealing with your plight as a human, not being able to reach these goals that you want.
One of the things that really attracted me to our collaboration, and the reason it's existed for 6+ years, is because I noticed early on in my journey with regards to wellness that I like to use vegetarianism or veganism as an example, where I'd ask people, when did you become a vegan, or when did you become a vegetarian? And these are people who do it not for religious reasons. And when you got down to it, there was usually like an emotional moment. There was an emotional trigger. Something happened. And very frequently it was they saw something. Either they saw a movie or they saw imagery. And they said, from that point forward, like, I just can't eat meat anymore. I can't eat animal products anymore. So trying to figure out a way through, right? I'm Mr. Science. I'm Mr. almost oddly rational, like to a detriment at some point. But so much of human nature is not driven by rationality. There is an emotional trigger to change. So, like, if we think about just eating better as the outcome, what are the emotional triggers that need to get flipped as a master persuader, as a master storyteller, to help people make that switch?
I think one of the things we were trying to do, especially by interviewing all these people, having these confession segments in there is really get people to understand that they are not alone in their journey there, and the amount of like crippling shame and debilitating feelings, bad feelings that they have within themselves. Like they're not the only one. They are not inherently bad because of those things, and they are not defined by those things. So that was where we really wanted to start, was to prove to people that, like, whether I have lived through that or Jonathan has lived through that, that's one thing. But the other people in this movie absolutely have, and they absolutely can like be your support group for half an hour and then move on to the other half an hour and the other half an hour, to where you get, you know, the different levels of, you know, your acceptance and your moving past all those levels of having something terrible happen to you. Right. And that's sort of what that is. That's an unending level of unending series of terrible things happening to you, because a lot of times they're self-inflicted, and that's really rough. And I could only imagine being in that situation and how debilitating it would be. So having the people on there be able to express that in just unbelievably deep ways that they do, I think really can grab someone in that situation and be like, oh, I'm not alone. Like that speaks to me so clearly of what I've been through. And then this person made a change. I want to be there.
In terms of making that change, what have you changed about your lifestyle based upon this journey?
I was eating pretty well. I've eaten pretty well most of my life, but I was eating better after I was eating in a better way after I read your first book. And that helped a lot. And I just understood how food worked in a far different manner than I had before. So the movie itself didn't change that much for me, because I'd already been on that path for a few years. But I would say that my understanding of how difficult it is for other people, or how confusing it is really, that got changed magnificently, because I just understood where they were coming from in a much better way. So yeah. I think it was more about my social understanding, my social intelligence, rather than specifically my nutrition intelligence. But I learned, you know, if I had the broad strokes of that stuff before in my head, I learned way more about it specifically. And I can actually go, you know, I'm lucky enough, I think now, if I would talk to someone for half an hour, I know concrete science about exactly all those things in a row in a usable format. And I wouldn't just be spouting sort of, you know, wives' tales and rough ideas of what I think might happen with these foods. Like I think I have a pretty good understanding of how that stuff works now, which is great. I love being in that space.
To that point, when someone, you know, asks you, or maybe you tell them you're working on this project, you're really excited about it, it's coming out, we did this better movie with folks over at Harvard Medical School, it's great, it's about food and so on and so forth, and they're like, cool, like, what's the takeaway?
Yeah.
How do you answer that question?
You know, I gauge how much time they have to talk about it, really, and how deep they want to get and how much they want to understand. You know, if it's one thing, I'm like, what do you eat? And they like say some stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, let's work on getting more, let's work on just getting some leafy greens in there. Maybe that's all we're doing. It sounds like you're having maybe too much sort of really cheap starchy things, and maybe you ought to work in more nutrient dense protein. And here's some good examples of that. Or like, what do you think is healthy? Explain some of those things to me, and let's see if you have misunderstandings, or you're just sort of missing the mark with how you want to incorporate them into your life. Because that's a pretty simple thing, and that's not exactly sciencey in terms of how I'm giving it to them, but it's very deep, strong science underneath what I would be talking about.
And then if someone were to ask you specific questions about, let's say, I mean, it's New Year's time. So I mean, we're launching this movie, and you're, you know, people are going to hear about you. They're going to know about your involvement with it. And someone might be like, you know, hey, Justin, should I go on what do you think about the keto diet? Or what do you think about calorie counting? Or what do you think about paleo? You know, how would you answer as a filmmaker, not necessarily like a wellness expert, but someone who's now indirectly well-versed in this, questions like, it's New Year, new you. Should I try this diet? How would you answer that question?
I would say that's explaining the fine points of keto is not going to be my skill in that situation, or paleo, or whatever it happens to be. But I would say that I understand what is underneath all of those concepts, and how those sort of got reverse engineered. people fell upon those ideas of how they thought a diet would work, and the fact that you had to put yourself in ketosis and this specific thing had to happen and all that. I'm not really into sort of the dogma and the role playing situation there. That just doesn't really appeal to me. I think there are a lot of people that does appeal to. And so what I would say is like, if you want to do keto because you're really into the role playing idea of that, and you have to have like a very specific way to orient it, that's cool. But I would say that here's the science underneath why that does work. And let's talk about that, so that when you invariably probably move on from keto, or probably move on from the specific dogmatic thing that you're working through right now, you have a better grasp of why the next one would also work if you did it the right way. So let's just get down into that. And then you know how to fish. Then you can do whatever you want. Go on as many diets as you want. Hopefully you understand at some point, you're like, oh, I don't really need a diet. I just need to work with these basic principles of how food works, and I'll be better off in the long run.
When we talk about diets like keto and paleo and South Beach and Zone, I mean, one thing those diets have going for them, which you alluded to, is they do focus on the type of food you're eating. They're not really focused on the quantity of food you're eating. So let's say you were speaking to one of your mom's friends, and only say one of your mom's friends because I think this is a bit generational, but not completely. And she said, you know, it's the new year and I'm committed to becoming more healthy. So I'm just, you know, I'm not going to eat as much. That's my approach.
Yeah. And I would say that let's focus on eating more good food than focus on eating less food in general. I think that's a way better way to approach life. And you're going to be happier in the long run because you're going to be nourishing your body with more positive things for it, rather than just trying to stay away from the negative things, which invariably then leaves like an empty avenue for those bad things to sort of creep back in. And then you're playing the willpower game, and then it's rough. And, you know, one of the ladies that was in the movie, Jamie, she was like, you know, I was on previous diets and they said that, you know, like, just keep your carbs in moderation. And moderation is something I can't do. It just doesn't work for me. So bad carbs. And so I approach it in the way that works for my body. And that's sustainable. The other way is not really sustainable, just like limiting the amount. You want higher quality, not lower quantity.
Beautiful. Well, Justin, I want to transition now just a little bit to there's another, what I think is so interesting about our collaboration is you have such a unique skill set and you're so good at storytelling. And as we talked about, there's so much about this that is, there's having the correct information, but then there's having the emotional drive to put it into your life. So another side of your storytelling is a film that you've been working on for a very long time, which I recently had the opportunity to watch. Very funny. It's called A Brick Madness. Can you tell us just in brief about this film, and also why it might not be as niche as it initially comes across?
Yeah, Brick Madness is a movie I've been working on since 2009. It's a comedy, 99-minute comedy about a national Lego. It's, you know, basically Lego. Within our world, they're called bricks. It's a national Lego tournament. And so if you're familiar with movies like Best in Show, if you like comedies that seem a little unique and I wouldn't say out there, but very realistic and it's a mockumentary. So it's a movie that is purporting itself to be real. There's a filmmaker within it, and we're pretending like these are all real stories, real people. And fortunately, like, the audience feedback about that has been really good, because a number of people have told me that, like, it took them a long time, if at all, to realize that it wasn't a real documentary, that it seemed real, that these people seemed like actual humans, and we were just watching them go about their lives in this thing. And, you know, so that was awesome. And I think that's what we really went for, is we're trying to get, you know, organic, real people on screen that really feel like they could be someone you could meet, but heightened and more fun and more entertaining and more comical, really, is what it comes down to. So yeah, that's what I've been working on for a long time. And I would say it is not as niche as one would think, maybe because, well, for one, Lego's like the biggest toy company in the world. Like, that's a huge thing. No one hates Lego, right? There's a lot of things that people dislike, hate, whatever it is. Like, everyone sort of loves Lego in one way or another, or at least they're like, it seems fun. I kind of wish I had time to do it. So it's about Lego. It's also about art at the core of it. It's also about just being creative and living your best life by making something that makes you happy. I mean, who doesn't like that? And more so than that, even today, it's like there's no politics. It's not about a pandemic. It's not about having to do Zoom calls. It's not about any of the things that we're so inundated with right now that like have sort of taken a toll on our life, our quality of life these days. And it's not about any of that. It's an hour and a half for you to be like, this is just fun. These are some people doing what they love. There's some intrigue. There's a whole lot of heart to it. And there's some crazy stuff happening, and it'll just be a good time. So that's really my pitch for the movie. And I think, you know, the feedback has been overwhelming, is that people just like enjoy it. You know, what's wrong with that?
No, I think it's beautiful. And it's an awesome thing that we can provide here in this interview, because on one hand, we've got Brick Madness, which, where can folks go to learn more about Brick Madness?
You can go to brickmadness.com. That's one thing. And you can go to find out everything about me at justinmacaleece.com. That will have Brick Madness and Better Movie and all sorts of other things. Those are the two main that are coming out now and next month.
Beautiful. So we can go to brickmadness.com and we can have fun for an hour and a half. We can escape for an hour and a half. It's amazing. And then Better, which is coming out in late January. I don't want to say it's not fun, but it is an emotional. I mean, if you're not aroused and slightly drained, but in a good way, at the end of watching it, I would be surprised. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, we're really going for it. We're trying to give people a rallying cry around actual, honest knowledge that's been compiled after looking at, 10, 12,000 different studies about how this works, and talking with absolute, geniuses of the level of their specialty, of what they deal with and how it relates to this stuff. Sorry, I think we lost video there for a second. We're dealing with these people that really know what they're talking about. And we're also dealing with people that really have lived through the pain of this situation. And all that is there, and it's transformational. It can take you in the course of an hour and a half and really get to feel like I have potential to be a different person starting tomorrow. And I can't wait for that to take place.
Beautiful. Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. Real quick, give us those two URLs one more time.
Yeah, brickmadness.com and bettermovie.com and justinmacaleece.com, JUSTINMCALEECE.com.
Beautiful. Well, Justin, thank you so much for sharing this small amount of time with us today and the past 6 years with me personally. I really, really appreciate it. And everyone who's watching this, please do check out all those URLs we mentioned, two tremendous opportunities for you to be entertained and transformed. And I just want to thank you, Justin, publicly. I mean, you have not only changed my life, but you will be changing the lives of millions of people in 2021 and beyond. So deeply appreciate it, sir.
Likewise.
Beautiful. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Please do check out all the resources we talked about: bettermovie.com, brickmadness.com, and justinmacaleece.com. As always, stay sane, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.